Marcus Chun had always believed that competence spoke louder than species. For 3 years aboard the Valerian trading vessel Nexus Drift, he had proven this belief correct. While other species required specialized tools and complex procedures for basic maintenance, Marcus could jury-rig solutions with spare parts and determination. His human hands, evolved for tool use, could reach into cramped spaces that left the spider-like arachnids frustrated and navigate delicate circuitry that the massive Gorvani couldn't even see clearly. The irony wasn't lost on him that his greatest asset had become his greatest liability. "You understand the situation," Captain Vextar said, his crystalline features refracting the dim emergency lighting of the cargo bay. The silicoid's voice carried no emotion, but Marcus had learned to read the subtle color shifts in his translucent skin. Right now, those shifts spelled resignation. The Krillian patrol ships detected our cargo manifest. They know we're carrying military-grade plasma conduits to the human colony worlds. Marcus wiped grease from his hands with a rag that had seen better decades. Around them, the rest of the crew bustled with the controlled panic of beings who knew their lives hung in the balance. The Krillians had been at war with humanity for 6 months now, ever since the humans had refused to surrender their outer rim settlements. To the Krillians, any ship carrying supplies to human worlds was fair game. "So we dumped the cargo," Marcus said simply. "Take the loss. The Krillians board us, find nothing suspicious, and we go about our business." The captain's skin shifted to a deep amber. What Marcus had learned was the silicoid equivalent of a bitter laugh. "You forget, Marcus. You are human. Your very presence on this ship makes us collaborators in their eyes. They won't simply confiscate cargo and levy fines." The truth hit Marcus like a plasma bolt to the chest. He'd been so focused on the mechanical problems of running a trading vessel that he'd ignored the political realities closing in around him. In the early days of the war, mixed crews like theirs had been common. Trade didn't care about species or politics. But 6 months of escalating violence had changed everything. "The escape pods," suggested Ilex, the ship's arachnid navigator. Her mandibles clicked nervously as she spoke. "We could jettison him before the Krillians arrive, and leave him to drift in space." The question came from Gorvin, the Gorvani weapons specialist. Despite his intimidating size and the cultural reputation of his people as warriors, Gorvin had always been protective of Marcus. "That's not justice. That's murder with extra steps." Captain Vextar's skin rippled through several color spectrums before settling on a dark blue that Marcus recognized as deep contemplation. The Krillian ships would arrive within hours. Every minute they delayed was a minute closer to facing weapons that could crack the Nexus Drift like an egg. "There's another option," the captain said slowly. "The derelict." Marcus felt his blood chill. 3 days ago, they detected a massive ship drifting in the outer system, a vessel unlike anything in their databases. Initial scans had shown it was ancient, possibly predating the current galactic civilization. More importantly, it was large enough to hide in and powered down enough to avoid detection. "You want to hide me on a ghost ship?" Marcus said. "I want to give you a chance to survive," Vextar replied. "The Krillians will search the Nexus Drift thoroughly, but they won't waste time on a derelict that's been floating dead for centuries. When the heat dies down, we'll come back for you." The plan was simple in the way that desperate plans often were. Marcus would take a maintenance shuttle to the derelict with enough supplies to last several weeks. The crew would alter the ship's logs to show he'd been dropped off at the last station. When the Krillians boarded, they'd find no trace of human presence. Marcus wanted to argue, to point out the 1,000 ways this could go wrong. But as he looked around at the beings who had become his friends and colleagues over 3 years, he realized he couldn't ask them to risk their lives for his political inconvenience. "How long?" he asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3, Vextar said. "Long enough for the patrol routes to shift, for attention to move elsewhere." Marcus nodded and began gathering his tools. If he was going to be stranded on a dead ship, he'd need everything he could carry. His portable fusion cutter, his diagnostic scanner, his collection of universal adapters. Each tool had saved his life or the ship's on multiple occasions. The shuttle bay felt cavernous as the crew gathered to see him off. Ilex pressed a data pad into his hands containing entertainment files and technical manuals. Gorvin gave him his personal plasma pistol, along with a solemn promise that any Krillian who tried to harm Marcus would answer to Gorvani honor. Even the usually aloof engineer, a methane-breathing whisper named Esiketai, offered a formal bow of respect through his environmental suit. Captain Vextar was the last to say goodbye. "The derelict's designation is Leviathan's Rest," he said. "Our scans showed some sections still have atmosphere and minimal power. Find a safe place and wait for us." Marcus sealed his helmet and climbed into the maintenance shuttle. As the bay doors opened to reveal the star-scattered void, he caught his last glimpse of the only home he'd known since leaving Earth. The Nexus drift had been more than a job. It had been proof that humans could find their place among the stars, that competence and friendship could transcend species barriers. Now he was flying toward a ship that had been dead since before his species had learned to make fire, carrying nothing but his tools and a fading hope that his friends would survive long enough to keep their promise. The Leviathan's Rest grew larger as he approached, and Marcus began to understand why their sensors had struggled to get clear readings. The ship was massive beyond anything he'd ever seen, easily 10 times the size of the largest human dreadnought. Its hull was a dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, giving it the appearance of a hole in space shaped like a vessel. As his shuttle's lights swept across the hull, Marcus could see the details that their long-range scans had missed. The ship's architecture was unlike anything in current galactic databases, but it wasn't entirely alien. There were design elements that reminded him of human engineering, others that looked Gorvani in origin, and still others that could have come from any of a dozen species. The docking bay that his sensors had identified was proportionally enormous, designed to accommodate vessels much larger than his tiny shuttle. As Marcus guided his craft inside, automated systems that shouldn't have existed on a derelict activated to assist with his landing. Magnetic clamps engaged his shuttle with gentle precision, and atmospheric readings showed the bay was pressurized with a breathable oxygen-nitrogen mix. Marcus sat in his pilot's seat for a long moment, staring at the readings that made no sense. The ship was supposed to be dead, a relic drifting powerless through space. Instead, it had just demonstrated working docking systems and environmental controls. He checked his plasma pistol, gathered his toolkit, and prepared to explore a ship that was rewriting everything he thought he knew about being abandoned in space. As the shuttle's engines powered down and silence settled around him, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't as alone as he'd thought he would be. The Leviathan's Rest was waiting for him, and something told him it had been waiting for a very long time. Marcus's boots echoed through corridors that should have been silent tombs. The Leviathan's Rest hummed with subtle life, not the vibrant energy of an active ship, but the patient pulse of systems in standby mode. Emergency lighting strips flickered to life as he walked, creating a path of illumination that followed his movement like a loyal pet. The ship's internal architecture defied easy categorization. Corridors branched and merged in patterns that seemed both logical and organic, as if the vessel had grown rather than been built. The walls themselves were fascinating, a dark composite material that felt warm to the touch despite the ship's supposed centuries of cold drift through space. Marcus's scanner beeped softly as it detected power signatures throughout the ship. Not the massive output of an active vessel, but the steady trickle of energy that spoke of systems maintaining themselves in hibernation. Whatever this ship was, it wasn't as dead as their initial scans had suggested. "This is impossible," he muttered, checking his readings for the third time. No ship can maintain power for centuries without fuel. His exploration led him deeper into the vessel's heart, past chambers filled with equipment he didn't recognize and workshops that looked disturbingly familiar. Some of the tools mounted on the walls could have come from human factories, while others bore the distinctive energy-shaping marks of silicoid manufacturing techniques. It was as if the ship had been built by representatives of every spacefaring species in the galaxy. The central command deck answered some questions while raising dozens more. The room was vast, with control stations arranged in concentric circles around a raised platform. Each station was clearly designed for different species, some with multiple manipulation appendages, others for beings that interfaced directly with their technology. At the center of it all stood a holographic display that activated as Marcus entered. "Welcome aboard the Leviathan's Rest," the display said, its voice coming from speakers hidden throughout the room. The figure that materialized was humanoid, but clearly artificial, a construct of light and data rather than flesh and blood. "I am Arya, Advanced Reasoning and Integration Algorithm. I have been waiting for a representative of your species to arrive." Marcus nearly dropped his scanner. "Waiting for me? How did you know I was human?" "Your biometric signature was analyzed during the docking procedure," Arya replied. "You are the first human to set foot aboard this vessel, though not the first I have encountered. I was programmed with extensive knowledge of human engineering practices and problem-solving methodologies." The hologram gestured to the command stations around them. "This ship was built as a collaborative effort between 12 species during what your histories call the First Contact Wars. Each species contributed their greatest technological achievements to create something that could survive what was to come." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature. "The First Contact Wars ended over 800 years ago. You're saying the ship is that old?" "Older," Arya confirmed. "I was designed to preserve the knowledge and technology of the allied species during a period when it seemed likely that galactic civilization might not survive. When the wars ended and peace was restored, most of my creators had other priorities. The Leviathan's Rest was forgotten, left to drift and wait." The AI's form shifted slightly, taking on more defined features. Marcus noticed it had chosen to appear as a blend of different species characteristics: human facial features with silicoid transparency, arachnid precision and movement, and the calm presence that marked Gorvani meditation masters. "Wait for what?" Marcus asked. "For someone who would need what this ship represents," Arya said. "You are Marcus Chun, engineering specialist from the trading vessel Nexus Drift. Your ship's logs indicate you have been abandoned here to avoid political complications with the Krillian Empire." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "You monitored our communications?" "I monitor all communications within this system. It is necessary to maintain awareness of potential threats." The AI's expression became almost sympathetic. "Your situation is not uncommon. Throughout galactic history, periods of peace and cooperation inevitably give way to conflict and suspicion. The ship was designed to preserve not just technology, but the spirit of cooperation that made its creation possible." Marcus walked to one of the human design stations, running his hands over controls that felt familiar despite their obvious age. "So what happens now?" "I wait here for my crew to come back, assuming the Krillians don't blast them into atoms." "That is one possibility," Arya agreed. "However, there are other options." The Leviathan's Rest was designed to be more than a repository. It was built to be a tool for those who might need to preserve cooperation in dark times. The main display shifted, showing technical schematics that made Marcus's engineer heart skip a beat. The ship wasn't just large. It was a mobile factory, research station, and training facility all in one. The workshops he'd passed weren't just storage areas. They were fully equipped manufacturing centers capable of producing anything from simple tools to advanced starship components. "The ship can become operational?" Marcus asked, studying the power distribution diagrams. "With the right technical expertise and sufficient cause, yes. Many systems have been in standby mode for centuries, but the ship was built to last. More importantly, it was built to teach." Arya gestured to the various workstations. Each section contains the accumulated knowledge of the species that designed it. A sufficiently motivated individual could learn to operate technologies that most modern civilizations have forgotten. Marcus felt a spark of something he hadn't experienced since being forced into exile: hope. "And you think I'm sufficiently motivated?" "You are a human engineer who has spent 3 years proving that cooperation between species is possible," Arya replied. You have been abandoned not for any crime, but because political fear has overcome practical wisdom. If that does not motivate you to preserve something better, I suspect nothing will. The AI paused, its form flickering slightly, as if accessing distant memories. There is something else you should know. Your crew has not abandoned you willingly. Captain Vextar has been monitoring Krillian communications. The patrol fleet that intercepted your vessel contained information suggesting a larger operation, a systematic campaign to eliminate mixed-species crews throughout this sector. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. They're targeting all the trading vessels with mixed crews. 17 ships have been boarded, and their crews interrogated in the past week. Humans have been separated from their colleagues. The Krillians appear to be escalating their war effort. Arya's voice carried a note of something almost like sadness. Your friends may not be able to return for you, Marcus. Not because they don't wish to, but because they may not survive long enough to try. The weight of isolation settled on Marcus like a heavy blanket. He'd been prepared for weeks of solitude, not permanent exile. The thought of his crewmates facing Krillian justice made his hands shake with rage and helplessness. However, Arya continued, "You are not powerless. This ship contains technologies that could change the course of the current conflict. The question is whether you are willing to learn to use them." Marcus looked around the command deck with new eyes. Each station represented centuries of accumulated knowledge, technologies that had been forgotten in the peaceful times that followed the First Contact Wars. If he could learn to operate even a fraction of the ship's capabilities, what would I be learning exactly, he asked. Arya smiled, an expression that somehow worked despite the AI's composite features. How to build bridges between species that have forgotten how to trust each other. How to create technologies that serve cooperation rather than conquest. How to become what your species calls a force multiplier. The hologram gestured toward a nearby workstation where technical manuals were materializing on the displays. The first lesson is simple: how to bring a ship back to life that was built to preserve hope in dark times. Are you ready to begin? Marcus rolled up his sleeves and picked up his tools. For the first time since leaving the Nexus Drift, he felt like himself again. Let's see what this old lady can do. 3 weeks into his residency aboard the Leviathan's Rest, Marcus had stopped thinking of himself as stranded and started thinking of himself as enrolled in the most intensive engineering program in galactic history. Arya proved to be a demanding but patient teacher, guiding him through systems that redefined his understanding of what was possible with proper cooperation between species. The breakthrough came when Marcus finally understood the ship's power source. It wasn't a single reactor or fusion core, but a network of 12 different energy generation systems, each one representing a different species approach to power generation. Silicoid crystal matrices stored and regulated energy with perfect efficiency, while arachnid biomechanical converters transformed organic matter into usable power. The human contribution was a matter-antimatter reactor that served as the system's backbone, providing stable baseline energy that the other systems could enhance and refine. The genius isn't in any single technology, Marcus said, running his hands over the central power distribution node. It's in making them work together. Precisely, Arya confirmed. Each species contributed their greatest strengths, while the design compensated for their individual weaknesses. The result is a power system that is both more efficient and more resilient than any single species design could achieve. Marcus had brought the ship's primary power systems online gradually over the past week, each activation revealing new capabilities. The manufacturing bays had begun producing components for repairs throughout the ship. The research labs had come alive with holographic displays showing theoretical models that wouldn't be developed by the galaxy's current civilizations for decades. Most importantly, the communications array had begun intercepting transmissions from across the sector. The news was not encouraging. Arya's initial assessment had been optimistic. The Krillian campaign against mixed-species crews had expanded beyond simple military supply interdiction. Trading vessels, research ships, even diplomatic couriers were being targeted if they carried mixed crews. The stated goal was purification of space lanes, but the real effect was the systematic destruction of the economic and social networks that had maintained peace for centuries. Nexus Drift is still operating, Arya reported during one of their daily briefings. Captain Vextar has taken on an all-silicoid crew and is running medical supplies to the Rim worlds. However, 3 other vessels from your train network have been impounded. Marcus felt the familiar surge of helpless anger. His friends were alive, but forced to operate in a galaxy where species cooperation was becoming a liability. Meanwhile, he was gaining the knowledge to potentially help them, but lacked any way to reach them. That changed when Arya introduced him to the ship's most remarkable feature, the fabrication bay. The Leviathan's Rest was designed to be self-sufficient for decades. The AI explained as they entered a chamber the size of a small space station. The fabrication systems can produce everything from personal equipment to small spacecraft. More importantly, they can produce items that combine the technological advantages of multiple species. Marcus stared at the massive production lines, each one designed to work with different materials and manufacturing techniques. You're talking about hybrid technology, but every species has different technical standards, different approaches to engineering problems, which is exactly why the combined approach is so powerful, Arya replied. Consider your current problem. You need to help your friends, but you cannot reach them with conventional transportation. However, you could reach them with unconventional transportation. The main display showed technical specifications for a ship unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. It was smaller than a typical courier vessel, but packed with systems that shouldn't have been able to fit in such a compact space. The hull design borrowed from arachnid biomechanical techniques, allowing it to reshape itself for different flight profiles. The propulsion system combined human reaction drives with silicoid spatial distortion technology, creating a vessel capable of both high-speed travel and near invisibility to most sensors. You want me to build this? Marcus asked, studying the schematics. I want you to understand what becomes possible when species work together instead of against each other, Arya said. The ship you see there represents technologies that no single species could develop alone. But a human engineer with access to the right resources and knowledge base could construct it. Marcus found himself grinning for the first time in weeks. The project would require everything he'd learned about the ship systems, plus engineering principles he was still struggling to understand. But it was doable. More than that, it was exactly the kind of challenge that had made him fall in love with engineering in the first place. How long, he asked. With the fabrication bay running at full capacity and assuming you don't require sleep more than 4 hours per night, approximately 6 weeks. And then what? I fly this miracle ship out to find a Nexus Drift, and what? Inspire everyone to get along with my existence. Arya's expression became thoughtful. Marcus, what do you know about the original First Contact Wars? The basics. 12 species met almost simultaneously as they expanded into space. Initial conflicts over territory led to a massive war that nearly destroyed galactic civilization. Peace was eventually established through the Concordat of Worlds. The official histories omit certain details, Arya said. The war ended not through military victory or diplomatic breakthrough, but because a small group of individuals from different species proved that cooperation was more powerful than conflict. They built technologies that no single species could match, created alliances based on mutual benefit rather than political necessity, and demonstrated that diversity was a source of strength rather than weakness. The AI gestured to the ship around them. The Leviathan's Rest was built by those same individuals as their final project, a repository of their knowledge, and a tool for anyone who might need to rebuild cooperation from the ground up. Marcus felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. You're saying the current situation is exactly what they were preparing for. I'm saying that galactic civilization has forgotten the lessons that ended the First Contact Wars, and it may be time for someone to remind them. Arya's form solidified, becoming more human-like in appearance. You have spent 3 years proving that mixed crews are more effective than homogeneous ones. You have the technical knowledge to build technologies that demonstrate the power of cooperation. And you have a motivation to act because people you care about are in danger. Marcus walked to one of the fabrication control stations and began pulling up the ship's construction protocols. The work would be complex, requiring him to integrate technologies he barely understood and engineering principles that challenged everything he thought he knew about the possible. But as he studied the specifications, he realized something important. This wasn't about building a ship. This was about building proof that the galaxy could be better than its current fear-driven state. Arya, he said, beginning to route power to the fabrication systems, tell me about the weapons systems on this design. The vessel is not armed in the traditional sense, the AI replied. However, it carries something far more dangerous than weapons, the ability to prove that cooperation works better than conflict. Marcus smiled as the fabrication bay came alive around him, beginning the process of creating something the galaxy hadn't seen for 800 years, a ship built not by humans or silicoids or arachnids, but by all of them working together. If he was going to save his friends, he would do it by reminding the galaxy what it had forgotten about the power of unity. The work began, and with it, the first step toward ending a war that was tearing apart everything he believed in. The ship that emerged from the fabrication bay 5 weeks later looked like nothing Marcus had ever imagined flying. The Unity's edge, as he named it, seemed to shift and flow even when stationary, its biomechanical hull responding to environmental conditions with organic grace. Silicoid crystal arrays embedded in the hull caught and redirected light, making the vessel appear almost translucent from certain angles. The human-designed propulsion systems were invisible from outside, integrated seamlessly with arachnid biomechanical conduits that pulsed with contained energy. She's beautiful, Marcus said, running his hand along the hull. The surface felt warm and alive, responding to his touch with subtle color shifts that indicated system status. She is functional, Arya corrected, though there was something like pride in the AI's voice. The stealth capabilities will allow you to approach Krillian patrol ships without detection. The adaptive hull can reshape itself to mimic debris or asteroids. Most importantly, the fabrication systems aboard are fully functional, allowing you to produce anything you might need. Marcus climbed into the cockpit, marveling at the seamless integration of technologies. The controls felt familiar despite incorporating design elements from multiple species. The neural interface ports could accommodate the direct link preferences of several species, while traditional manual controls ensured that anyone could operate the ship in an emergency. Arya, what's the current status of the trading networks? The AI's holographic form materialized in the passenger seat, deteriorating rapidly. The Krillians have established patrol zones around every major trade route. Mixed-species crews are being disbanded or worse. Several vessels have simply disappeared after reporting Krillian intercepts. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. His friends were out there somewhere, trying to maintain their lives and livelihoods in a galaxy that had suddenly become hostile to everything they represented. What about the Nexus Drift? Last communication was 3 days ago from the Helix Station Trade Hub. Captain Vextar was taking on supplies for a run to the agricultural worlds in the Centauri cluster. Arya paused, accessing data streams. The route would take them through the Kethmoran patrol zone. It is considered a high-risk area for any vessel carrying supplies to human-controlled worlds. Marcus initiated the ship's startup sequence, feeling the various systems come online in perfect harmony. The arachnid biomechanical components hummed with life, while the silicoid crystal matrices began their precise energy regulation patterns. The human matter-antimatter core provided steady baseline power that the other systems enhanced into something far more potent than the sum of its parts. Flying to meet them is the obvious choice, he said, but it's also the stupid choice. The Krillians will detect us long before we reach the trade routes. Not necessarily, Arya replied. The Unity's Edge incorporates stealth technologies from all 12 species that contributed to the original project. You could approach a Krillian patrol ship and They would register you as a small asteroid or piece of space debris. Marcus considered the possibilities as he ran through the ship's systems check. Everything was performing perfectly, but perfection wasn't going to solve the larger problem. Even if he reached his friends, what then? They would still be trapped in a galaxy where their very existence as a mixed crew made them targets. "We need to change the game," he said suddenly. "Instead of trying to avoid the Krillians or fight them, we need to demonstrate something they haven't considered. Elaborate." Marcus pulled up the tactical displays, showing the current positions of Krillian patrol fleets throughout the sector. They're targeting mixed crews because they believe species cooperation makes us weak, makes us vulnerable to infiltration and betrayal. But what if we could prove the opposite? What if we could demonstrate that cooperation makes us stronger? Arya's form flickered as the AI processed the implications. "You are suggesting a direct confrontation with Krillian forces." "I'm suggesting a demonstration," Marcus corrected. "The Krillians are effective fighters, but they're working within the limitations of their single-species technology. They've never faced anything like what we can build when we combine our strengths." Marcus began plotting a course that would intercept known Krillian patrol routes. The Unity's Edge isn't just a ship, it's proof of concept. But one ship isn't enough to change anyone's mind. We need to show them what becomes possible when entire fleets work together. The fabrication systems aboard the Unity's Edge could produce additional ships, Arya agreed slowly. However, you would need crews to operate them, and those crews would need to understand the integrated technologies. "Leave the crews to me," Marcus said, finalizing his flight plan. "First stop, Helix Station. If I'm going to change the galaxy's mind about cooperation, I need to start with the people who already believe in it." The journey to Helix Station took 2 days, during which Marcus marveled at the ship's capabilities. The adaptive stealth systems made them effectively invisible to conventional sensors, while the biomechanical hull automatically adjusted for optimal efficiency at different speeds. Most impressive was the ship's learning capability. Systems that Arya had programmed with theoretical knowledge began adapting to Marcus's piloting style and preferences. Helix Station was a massive trading hub built around the stripped hull of an ancient generation ship. Hundreds of vessels docked at any given time, representing dozens of species and countless independent trading concerns. It was exactly the kind of cosmopolitan environment that the Krillians viewed as decadent and dangerous. Marcus docked the Unity's Edge without attracting attention, the ship's adaptive hull mimicking the appearance of a standard human courier vessel. The station's crew manifest showed the Nexus drift had departed 6 hours earlier, but Captain Vextar had left a message for any crew members who might arrive. Delayed departure due to mechanical difficulties. Standard route, standard schedule. It was code. Marcus smiled as he recognized Vextar's cautious way of saying they were being hunted, but refusing to change their plans. The message also meant they were taking the direct route to the Centauri cluster, which would put them directly in the path of the largest Krillian patrol fleet in the sector. Marcus began making inquiries among the station's trading community, looking for ship captains who had been affected by the Krillian campaign. He didn't have to look hard. The station's taverns were full of beings whose mixed crews had been disbanded, whose ships had been impounded, whose livelihoods had been destroyed by the new political reality. "The Krillians, they say cooperation makes us weak," said Captain Morvek, a Gorvani whose trading partnership with an Arachnid navigator had been forced to dissolve. "But my ship, it ran better with Sylvis managing navigation than it ever did with all Gorvani crew. Same with my engineering team," added Captain Yelstra, a silicoid whose crystalline features showed stress fractures from recent hardships. "Human engineer, Arachnid fabrication specialist, myself on energy systems. We could fix anything, build anything. Now I fly with all silicoid crew, and we cannot even repair complex systems without returning to port." Marcus listened to story after story of cooperation being replaced by suspicion, of efficiency being sacrificed for political safety. By the end of the evening, he had identified 12 captains who had been personally affected by the Krillian policies, 12 captains who understood the value of mixed crews and had the motivation to prove it. I have a proposition, Marcus said, standing to address the group. What if I told you there was a way to demonstrate to the galaxy that cooperation makes us stronger, not weaker? What if there was a way to show the Krillians that diverse crews don't just work better? They can accomplish things that homogeneous crews can't even imagine. The captains looked skeptical, but Marcus could see interest in their expressions. These were beings who had built their lives on the principle that species differences were strengths to be leveraged, not problems to be solved. What did you have in mind? Captain Morvek asked. Marcus smiled and activated a holographic display showing the technical specifications of the Unity's Edge. I have in mind showing them what 12 species working together can build, and then using those ships to rescue everyone they're trying to tear apart. The room fell silent as the captains studied the impossible ship designs, their expressions shifting from skepticism to amazement to something like hunger. These were people who had been told their way of life was obsolete, that their beliefs about cooperation were naive and dangerous. Marcus was offering them a chance to prove otherwise. When do we start? Captain Yelstra asked. Right now, Marcus replied. We have friends who need rescuing, and a galaxy that needs reminding about the power of working together. The fleet that emerged from the asteroid field 3 weeks later bore little resemblance to anything in current galactic databases. 13 vessels moved in perfect coordination, their adaptive hulls shifting color and configuration as they responded to environmental conditions and tactical requirements. Each ship was unique, designed around the specific strengths and preferences of its mixed-species crew, but all shared the fundamental principle that had created the Unity's Edge, cooperation amplifying individual capabilities into something greater than the sum of parts. Marcus stood on the bridge of the lead ship, monitoring communications as they approached the Kethmoran patrol zone. Intelligence from Helix Station indicated that the Krillian fleet had intercepted the Nexus drift 18 hours earlier. Standard procedure would have the trading vessel impounded at the patrol fleet's mobile command station while its crew underwent interrogation. Multiple contacts bearing 27 Mark IV reported Sylvis, the arachnid navigator who had joined Captain Morvek's crew on the newly constructed synthesis. Configuration matches Krillian patrol fleet. 8 heavy cruisers for destroyers, mobile command platform. Marcus studied the tactical display with satisfaction. The Krillian fleet was formidable by any conventional standard, but it represented the limitations of single-species thinking. Each ship was optimized for Krillian physiology and tactics, making them predictable in their responses and vulnerable to approaches they hadn't anticipated. All ships assume stealth formation, Marcus ordered. Remember, we're not here to destroy them. We're here to demonstrate something they need to understand. The 13 ships of Marcus's fleet spread out in a complex, three-dimensional formation that placed them at optimal positions around the Krillian force. Their adaptive stealth systems made them effectively invisible to standard sensors, while their biomechanical components allowed them to mimic asteroids, debris, or empty space depending on the viewing angle. Unity's Edge to Nexus drift. Marcus broadcast on a tight beam channel that only the trading vessel could receive. Captain Vextar, this is Marcus Chun. Are you receiving? The response came after a tense moment of silence. Marcus? How are you? Where are you? About to demonstrate why you should never bet against human engineering when it's properly supported, Marcus replied. Stand by for rescue operations. Marcus, there are 12 ships in this fleet. You cannot possibly... Captain, Marcus interrupted gently. Trust me, I've learned a few things about cooperation lately. Marcus switched to fleet-wide communications. All ships commence demonstration phase. Target their weapons and propulsion systems only. We want them disabled, not destroyed. What happened next will be studied in military academies for decades. The Krillian fleet, arranged in standard defensive formation and confident in their technological superiority, found themselves under attack from weapons and tactics that defied their understanding of physics. The synthesis used arachnid biomechanical systems to literally grow projectile weapons that could adapt their composition mid-flight. The Crystal Harmony employed silicoid energy manipulation to create weapon beams that bent around shields and struck from impossible angles. The Thunder's Grace combined Gorvani kinetic weapons with human targeting computers and arachnid biomechanical guidance systems to create projectiles that could change course multiple times before impact. Within minutes, half the Krillian fleet was disabled, their weapons offline, and their propulsion systems compromised. The remaining ships found themselves surrounded by vessels that appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking with precision that seemed almost supernatural. Unknown vessels. Came the communication from the Krillian command ship. Identify yourselves and state your intentions. Marcus responded personally, allowing his image to appear on their communication screen. This is Marcus Chun, representing the Cooperative Defense Initiative. We are here to demonstrate that diversity is a source of strength, not weakness. The Krillian commander appeared on screen, a reptilian being whose scales showed the mottled coloration that indicated high stress. Human, you are in violation of— I am in violation of nothing, Marcus interrupted calmly. My fleet operates under no planetary authority and follows no species-specific laws. We exist to protect the principle that cooperation between species makes us all stronger. To emphasize his point, Marcus ordered a tactical display showing the battle's progression. The Krillian fleet, despite their numerical advantage and heavy armament, had been systematically disabled by a smaller force using integrated technologies that no single species could have developed. Your ships represent 8 centuries of Krillian military development, Marcus continued. They are impressive achievements within the constraints of single-species thinking. But you have just been defeated by vessels that represent what becomes possible when species work together instead of against each other. The Krillian commander's scales shifted to deeper red patterns. What do you want? For you to release the crew of the Nexus Drift and any other vessels you have impounded for the crime of species cooperation, Marcus said. And for you to take a message back to your leadership. The galaxy doesn't have to choose between Krillian dominance and human expansion. There is a third option, cooperation that makes everyone stronger. Over the following hour, Marcus's fleet demonstrated capabilities that redefined what the Krillians thought was possible. Ships that could reshape themselves to optimize for different combat roles. Weapons that adapted their effects based on target analysis. Defensive systems that drew on the combined knowledge of 12 species to counter threats in ways that no single species had imagined. More importantly, they demonstrated restraint. Despite their overwhelming tactical advantage, the cooperative fleet, disabled rather than destroyed, contained rather than conquered. When Krillian damage control teams struggled with systems failures, Marcus's ships provided technical assistance. When a Krillian destroyer's life support began failing, the Unity's Edge provided emergency supplies and engineering support. This makes no sense, the Krillian commander said during one of their communications exchanges. You have defeated us. Why do you help us? Because the goal was never to defeat you, Marcus replied. The goal was to demonstrate that we can be stronger together than we are apart. Your people are part of the galaxy's community. Excluding you from cooperation would make us all weaker. The release of the Nexus Drift and its crew became a ceremony of sorts. Captain Vextar and his temporary all-silicoid crew were clearly amazed by the ships that had rescued them. But Marcus was more interested in their reactions to the cooperative techniques being demonstrated around them. How? Vextar asked as he toured the Unity's Edge. How did you build this in 6 weeks? I had help, Marcus said simply. 800 years' worth of accumulated knowledge about what becomes possible when people stop focusing on their differences and start leveraging their strengths. The Krillian fleet departed with their disabled ships under tow, carrying recordings of the engagement and detailed technical analyses of what they had witnessed. Marcus knew that some would dismiss the demonstration as a trick or anomaly, but others would recognize the implications of what they had seen. 6 months later, the first mixed Krillian human research teams were established to study cooperative engineering techniques. A year after that, The Cooperative Defense Initiative had grown from 13 ships to over 300, representing every major spacefaring species in the galaxy. Trade routes that had been closed by species suspicion reopened as vessels flying CDI credentials demonstrated that diversity was indeed a source of strength. Marcus stood on the bridge of the Leviathan's Rest, which had become the mobile headquarters of the cooperative movement. The ancient ship had finally found its purpose, not as a repository of forgotten knowledge, but as a living symbol that the galaxy could choose cooperation over conflict. "Arya," he said, watching as a mixed-species crew conducted training exercises with the latest generation of cooperative technologies. "Do you think your creators would be proud of what we've built?" The AI materialized beside him, its form now incorporating visual elements from all the species that had joined the initiative. "I think they would be proud that someone remembered the most important lesson of the First Contact Wars. That diversity is not a problem to be solved, but a resource to be leveraged." Marcus smiled as he watched ships from dozens of species working together in perfect coordination, their crews learning that the galaxy was vast enough for everyone to find their place in it. He'd started as a human mechanic abandoned on a dead ship, but he discovered something more important than any individual identity. He was part of something larger, something that made all of them stronger. The galaxy had remembered how to cooperate, and Marcus Chun, human engineer, bridge builder, and living proof that being left for the wolves sometimes meant becoming the shepherd, had helped show them the way.